Gaudete, gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete.
Welcome to the Rediscovery channel. This is the channel where I, Ivor Kovac, and my good friend Stilgar take turns coming up with topics from history that the other person doesn't know about and often hasn't heard about. And today it is my turn, and I want to ask Stilgar, what do you know about the Neanderthals?
Yeah, quite a few things, I think.
Oh.
But I mean, I think they were based in Europe. I think they died out over the last ice age. I think they're still part of European DNA, and I think also Asian DNA to some extent. What else? Yeah, I think that's about it. I think they found a couple caves in Germany and in Spain. But I've seen some skeletons of theirs. They look like gym bros. And they actually had bigger brains than we did.
Yes.
Yeah, but super interesting topic. Tell me more.
Yeah. So if I ask you, where do Neanderthals show up in our history? Like not just finding bones, but if we have any records of them and how they factor in, would you have any idea?
I don't think we have any written history of the Neanderthals because I don't think I think they existed when we weren't writing history yet. So I think we just have bones that we found and cave drawings, and that's about it, right? Instruments.
Okay. So what I want to do is first I want to go over the facts about Neanderthal Man, like stuff which shouldn't be contentious because it's just discoveries that have been made, and talk about what they were like and what's known. And then what I want to do after I've gone through all that is talk about how the Neanderthals fit in with our history and what sort of records our ancestors actually, it looks like they did keep some records of them and some memories alive. And I want to cover that and suggest an identity for the Neanderthals. So let's get into it. Stilgar, you and me are old enough that we probably remember from when we were kids that Neanderthals were generally depicted as some kind of ape men, right?
Like, yeah, in like 80s movies, 90s movies.
Yeah, like covered in hair and bent over. And there's been some illustrations of them where they basically make them look like apes. Usually they depict them as having dark skin. For the longest time, it was thought that they couldn't even talk. But it turns out that all this stuff is wrong, in fact. And all those assumptions existed before it was possible to do any genetic analysis. So I want to talk a little bit about the discovery of the Neanderthals and how the views of them have changed. So the first Neanderthal bone was found in 1829 in a cave near Ingus, Belgium. And in 1856, more complete remains were found in Feldhofer Cave in a place called the Neander Valley, which is where the name Neanderthals comes from. And this is in Germany. And actually,
you look at Tal in German, it literally means valley.
Yeah, and I heard that Neander means new man. So it's kind of interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Then that's where the name comes from, in case anyone's wondering. Then in 1857, there was a German scientist named Hermann Schaffhausen who said that the bones belonged to a savage and barbarous race of ancient human. And you had another scientist in 1863, an Irish geologist named William King, who stated that the Neanderthal bones belong to a totally separate species. They are not human. And he called them Homo neanderthalensis, which is still the term that you'll see being used today, the official term for them, scientific term. However, not everybody agreed right away on what they were. So there's another scientist named Rudolf Virchow who's somebody that I like and might actually do a topic on him at some point. And what he asserted is that the bones were those of a diseased human, not some other species. And he told everybody that we should not be quick to just designate something as another species. And so for a while, there was, a difference of opinion on the matter. Some people agreed with Virchow and some people agreed with these other guys. Now, Ernst Haeckel, who is a big follower of Charles Darwin, believed that Neanderthal man was a less evolved ancestor of modern man, and he called them Homo stupidus. And he actually made a chart, an evolutionary chart, where he put Neanderthals as a missing link between humans and apes. And I'll put a picture of that in the slideshow because you can still see it for yourself. But suffice it to say that Ernst Haeckel was probably as far away from political correctness as one could be. I mean, Homo stupidus. So basically, stupid man. And the view of Neanderthals as being subhuman and ape-like became dominant by the end of the 1800s. So it became the official establishment view for most of the world. And it is believed that they were hunchbacked, stooped like an ape, hairy, and had dark skin, could not speak, and had low empathy, like an animal. And in 1873, there was an article put out in Harper's Weekly, which I have some reprints of Harper's Weekly. I used that as one of my sources for that old entry, Battle of Shimonoseki Straits. But according to Harper's Weekly, what they said is, a more ferocious-looking gorilla-like human being can hardly be imagined. But then what happens is later on, people began to speculate that Neanderthals might actually be the ancestors of native Europeans. Well, I guess Ernst Haeckel thought that all along. But this remained completely speculative until it became possible to test the DNA. So the first DNA of Neanderthals was sequenced in 1997, and it was actually the mitochondrial DNA that they sequenced first. And what they found is that on average, there were 27 differences between the mitochondrial DNA of Neanderthals and Europeans, which is way too much of a difference for them to be an ancestor of modern Europeans, because the mitochondrial DNA changes very slowly, just like the Y chromosome in men. Mitochondria DNA you get only from your mother. Mitochondrial DNA will still show up in the population if another group has moved in and conquered the area, because the women will breed with the conquerors. So that aspect of the DNA will continue. But it looks like the Neanderthal women, at least, did not pass on their mitochondrial DNA to modern Europeans or any other known contemporary group of humans. Then in 2007, they actually sequenced about 60% of the autosomal DNA of some Neanderthal skeletons. And this was done by a team led by somebody named Habo, and I'm probably butchering his name. I don't know what kind of name this is. I'll put it in the text there. But they found that Neanderthals had a gene called FOXP2, which is what codes for speech in humans. So this put to bed the notion that Neanderthals couldn't speak. Now, we said they didn't pass on the mitochondrial DNA, but it turns out they did pass on some of their autosomal DNA, because contemporary humans of all races, except for sub-Saharan Africans, have on average 2% of their DNA coming from Neanderthal sources. So, and it varies depending on the region of the world. And you could have more or less. Some people have as high as 4% of their DNA comes from Neanderthals,
But does it mean it didn't come from the women, but it came from the men instead?
It comes from both. So autosomal DNA is all of your DNA that you get from both parents, your nuclear DNA.
Okay.
I think Y chromosome is not considered as that. Yeah, because Y chromosome you only get from your father. So, yeah. So the basic DNA, that comes from both parents. So we did mix with Neanderthals at some point, and depending on what group you belong to. So for Europeans, we average at about 2 to 3% of our DNA is Neanderthal derived. For East Asians, it's a bit higher. 4% of their, well, for them their average is 3%, but it can get to be as high as 4%. And on average, Asians have about 8 to 24% more Neanderthal DNA in them than Europeans.
8 to 24% more.
More, yes. So our average is
yeah, but that's not like on the total. So it's not like we have 2% out of 100, and they would have 10% out of 100.
No, they have 3% on average, sometimes 4.
Yeah. So we would be like 2 point something, and they would be 3 point something. So okay.
Well, I mean, I don't mean that it's
So no, I'm just trying to okay. Yeah. Cool.
I tried to pick all my words carefully, but one of the articles I read, so 8 to 24% more Neanderthal DNA in them than Europeans doesn't mean it's 24% of their DNA. It just means that they have that percentage,
almost a quarter more.
Yeah, than we do. But it's kind of interesting though that they are like that, because most of the Neanderthal sites are found in Europe. There's none found in the places where Asians live.
Yeah, didn't they find a different ancestor or different species in Asia? I don't know if you stumbled upon that, but
so there are other races of extinct humans which significantly differ from modern races that we have today that have gone extinct, and it's also mysterious. But I didn't want to make this, I wanted to focus on Neanderthals for this one, because it's already going to be. Maybe some other time we can talk about Denisovan and Dragon Man and all that other stuff.
So, any theories on how the Asians ended up with so much Neanderthal DNA, even though we never found them there?
I do have some theories on it, but I want to save that for when I get to the later.
Okay.
To the theoretical area,
Yeah.
So, but on that topic, Asians, they actually have more Denisovan DNA in them than we do. I think we have none. And there's a lot of Denisovan DNA concentrated in, I think, Filipinos, actually. But, that's sometime we'll have to look at that also. But for now, let's go on. So, the places where Neanderthal sites were found is mostly in Europe and a bit in Central Asia and a little bit in the Middle East, like where you have Syria and Israel today. So for the most part, let's see, the easternmost range of where Neanderthals lived is the Altai Mountains. There's no Neanderthal sites found to the east of the Altai Mountains. Now,
which is in Russia, right?
Right. In the ancient world, before Christ, before the Romans, before the Turkic and Hunnic invasions, the Indo-European population used to spread unbroken all the way to what today we would call Western China and northern India. Of course, in India, they were mixing with the indigenous people there, but the Neanderthals, their habitat fits almost completely inside of the original ancient range for Indo-Europeans. That doesn't mean that they were Indo-Europeans, but they overlapped with us for the most part, except for the part that's in the Middle East. Okay, so there is one theory that I guess I was going to mention now. But one possibility for why Asians have more Neanderthal DNA in them than we do is that the founding population of Asians is smaller, and our founding population is larger or involves successive waves of people, so it might have diluted it in us a bit more than them. But again, that's like speculative. Nobody really knows for sure. Supposedly, we had more waves of in-migration into Europe than they did. I have another theory, but I'll come to that later. So, moving along here. So I have a quote from Britannica that I wanted to read, because a lot of the news articles and things that I read, they still will say Neanderthals are a separate species, even though we were able to breed with them and they with us, and the kids were reproducing.
How would it be a separate species if you can breed with each other?
Yeah, it shouldn't exactly. So really, we aren't a separate species. They were another race of humans.
Yeah.
Because
I never thought about it like that, but it makes perfect sense. Like, well, because how otherwise would we have been able to breed with them? They're not the
right.
same race. Or, I mean, if they're not the same species.
Yeah, you can't breed with another species.
No.
And
Yeah,
and
and
so
like at best, you would get like hybrid animals that cannot reproduce, right? Like
yeah,
anyway,
maybe, but
like
that's
I think if you get a tiger and a lion together, you get a liger. But I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure that ligers can't reproduce. So anyway,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you're right, Stilgar. It's kind of an artifact from the time when they had not analyzed the DNA from these bones, and they didn't know that we carried part of them inside of us. They didn't know that we had ever mixed with them. They just assumed that, oh, this doesn't match any human skulls that we have today, so it must be something else. Um, and that's when you leap to conclusions and assumptions, you can be proven wrong later on, of course, as more information comes out. So here's what Britannica has to say. It was reported that Eurasians generally carry about 2% Neanderthal nuclear DNA, which suggests that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred and thus were not two different biological species, despite most classifications treating them as such. It was previously argued on the basis of morphology that modern humans are distinct from Neanderthals, although the question of how different is different has always plagued debates on the apparent uniqueness of this fossil human group. When single specimens of Neanderthals and modern humans are compared, Neanderthals can easily be distinguished. When a broad range of individuals are examined, however, the variation observed fails to isolate Neanderthals as a group that is completely distinct from modern humans for every trait. And it's kind of like that with races. Today we have different races, right? But there's always exceptions to the generalizations, and there's not always like a clear line of demarcation between one group and the other. Of course, Neanderthals are extinct, and the degree of difference between them and us is actually bigger than the differences that we have between modern races today. But I'll come back to that. Let's keep going. So the physical traits of the Neanderthals. The average height for Neanderthal men generally is 5 feet 5 inches to 5 feet 6 inches. And in centimeters, that's 164 to 168. The average height for Neanderthal woman is 5'0" to 5'1", which is pretty short. And in centimeters, it's 152 to 156 centimeters. And they had a proportionately larger rib cage and pelvis than any of the modern human races that we have today. So they were wider from side to side, and they had proportionately shorter arms and legs compared with the length of their core, or the size of their core, I guess, and compared with the modern humans which are alive today. They had a lower center of gravity because of this large pelvis, and the lower extremities, like their forearms and their legs, were a bit shorter compared with the length of their upper extremities. They had a broad chest with large, broad rib cage that's deep and actually widens out in the center. So these guys would have had kind of ribs sticking out of their sides to some degree. I mean, not through the skin, but like you'd see the bulge from their lower rib cage if they were still alive today. Contrary to the old stereotype, there was less lumbar lordosis, which is the scientific term, which basically means a back curvature. So their backs were actually straighter than ours. They had a straighter, better posture. They were not at all hunched or stooped, except for like the specimen they found where the guy had arthritis and was all bent up because of that.
I was gonna say that they found. I thought it was gonna like arthritis or rheumatoidism or something like that, right? They found some bones and then because those were curved, and then they said, oh, they were all walking like that. Yeah.
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 Yeah, they leapt to quite a few conclusions about this stuff, and you can still see. Like I read a lot of news. It's actually one of my hobbies is to read the news. Even though it irritates me a lot, I still do it. But I see articles coming out all the time. We found this bone, we found that bone, and they right away will have an artist, or now they're just using AIs, but they'll right away like paint this guy as looking like some kind of subhuman monstrosity or like an ape man or a missing link. And then later on, they kind of, if you follow up with the story later on, they kind of dial it back a bit and make them look more human. So realistically, even the more human depiction is probably wrong too, because they don't know. But and DNA is it's getting harder for them to propose that things are intermediate forms and missing links, because now they have the technology to go in and examine the DNA and find out that these things are humans a lot of the time. Or sometimes it's an ape or a chimpanzee that they find, which is completely not human. So really, there are no actual missing links that have been found. But let me get back on track here. Okay, so the BMI for Neanderthals is roughly 240 to 244 centimeters per kilogram, I guess, which is above the average for modern Americans and Canadians.
How many kilogram? How many? Sorry.
240 to 244 square centimeters per kilogram. So
Oh, okay. How does that translate to their weight?
it
Sorry.
doesn't. BMI means body mass index,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and it's a way that they measure how healthy you are. And the idea is based on your height, you should have a certain BMI.
Mm-hmm.
I personally, I don't think that the science for BMI is very good, because it doesn't distinguish between being muscular and being fat.
So these guys were, or guys and girls that were extremely muscular. They were like bodybuilders.
That's
Pretty
right.
much.
That's
Yeah.
the implication here, because Americans and Canadians are generally fat.
Yeah.
These guys had a bigger BMI, had more higher BMI than we do, but it's not because they were fat. So
They're like Arnold Schwarzenegger type kind of
yes,
guys.
think of like Arnold Schwarzenegger for the man, and then like Atalanta, or like a CrossFit, kind of like CrossFit looking people for the
Like
women and for the men.
Conan the Barbarian and Red
Like,
Sonja.
yeah, Conan the Barbarian and She-Hulk, except for short. Like if She-Hulk was 5'5".
Okay.
Um, so yeah,
Nice.
they were buff and swole, and actually they had a very high testosterone level, higher than anything that's recorded in modern man. Our
How
testosterone
do they
level,
know that though? The testosterone level. Like how would they know that?
they find us saturating the bones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they were really swimming in it, and that's another thing that'll make you buff and swole. It'll also make you aggressive, and you know what else it'll do. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. So why
so
did
they
they die out if they're like buff, small? built. They got big bones.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they got big brains.
Hmm.
Like why did they were able to talk? They actually, some of their tools, I don't know if you have something about their tools as well, but the tools they found were like extremely advanced for the time. So it's not
Yep.
like they were dumb at all. On the contrary. So what happened to them?
Well,
Maybe you'll get to that later. Sorry if
yeah,
I'm
I will get to that
okay.
later. I don't want to
Okay.
spoil it, but
Okay.
yeah, I'm coming to that. That's a big part of
Okay.
my
Cool.
presentation. So, yeah, they were built for strength more so than endurance, and it's believed that they were very good sprinters, but they're not going to be good for like long distance running. And they had a higher frequency of 39 alleles, which code for physical power, than modern humans. Now, I read this in a professional article, which it'll be in the sources below. All my sources will be down there. But this part of the article where they talked about the higher frequency of alleles coding for strength, I don't know what that frequency is. These guys didn't bother to give it. They just linked to another study for that, and that study was behind a paywall, which I wasn't getting ready to pay for. So if anybody knows this, like I haven't been able to find out the exact, to put the exact difference in numbers of their strength level, but what I've seen is that for sure their strength level was their upper limits for physical strength, and their top potential, their max, is like definitely way higher than that of anybody that's alive today. But I don't know like what the cap is. Um, so yeah, we can infer that they had a higher potential for extreme strength. Like they're going to bench a lot more than you can, even if you were like buff and swole like Arnold Schwarzenegger. A Neanderthal who gets as buff and swole as he can get is still going to be benching more than you. Um,
Mm.
like and some of the articles and things that I looked at suggested that the difference between a Neanderthal man in peak strength and a regular modern human at his peak strength is like the disparity between men and women. So if you got into a fight with one of these guys and it just comes down to physical strength and you're not using weapons or you're more trained in martial arts or whatever, then you have the chance that a woman has if she gets attacked by a man, basically. Um, so, yeah, it's kind of interesting. And Neanderthals, this is important. Neanderthals had stronger arms, with the teres minor muscle being in a stronger position to the shoulder blade and attached in a deeper position on the side. So it's rather, sorry, on the side. It's on the side rather than close to the outer edge like modern humans. So there's greater arm strength and just a natural potential for greater strength. According to Colin Shaw, who worked at the University of Cambridge in England, he says Neanderthals have really interesting upper bodies. If you and I are both right-handed, you'd expect 4 to 13% asymmetry between our arms. Neanderthals have up to 50% more asymmetry. They were doing something with their dominant arms that were either more intense or repetitive or both than we do today. The only population of modern people that we see who are similar are tennis players who hit tennis balls many years aggressively. So they're doing something that really uses their dominant arm a lot, some intense labor of some kind.
So what were they doing with their right arm? Were they like making tools or like stabbing animals or something like that?
So the establishment mainstream people, what they think it's from is stabbing animals with a
Okay.
spear.
But you
But
wouldn't have to stab an animal repetitively. If you stab it once or twice, it's gonna be dead. You don't have to stab it like 100 times. I don't think so.
so yeah,
Yeah.
Stilgar, the establishment, the mainstream, establishment theory is definitely has holes in it whenever it comes to anything, pretty much.
Okay.
And you know, the purpose of the establishment, especially when it's state-sponsored sciences and stuff like that, is not to just get at the truth at any cost. It's to it's to craft a narrative and a worldview, basically not to tell you what to think rather than how to think. It's not to give you the truth, but to give you what they want you to think. So I have my own theory, which that could be part of it. Stabbing the animals probably is, but that's not all of it. But you'll see when I get to it. So
I'm gonna guess actually maybe it might be some kind of sport. I don't know.
okay.
Maybe I don't know. Okay, but like repetitively, like it's either tool making because you're like hitting like an object again and again, or it would be something like tennis. Like maybe they had some kind of like part of their warrior culture that you'd have to like train with a weapon. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, continue.
So, and yeah, like you mentioned, they had larger brains than modern Europeans. And actually, there is a difference in brain size between different groups today. I think Asians actually have the largest brain size in terms of raw mass. Then the Neanderthal brain size, though, they beat everybody that's alive today. So their brain volume, it ranges from 1,200 cubic centimeters to 1,750 cubic centimeters. I don't know what this is in the English units, but I do know that it's bigger than what we have got. Then there is a catch to this, though, which you'll see in a little bit. They had larger, blunt noses. You know, they had wide noses. You know, as sub-Saharan Africans, they also have wide noses, but the Neanderthal nose is wide and long. So they got length and volume. Their noses were wide, but they're not
Because
flat.
of
They're
the
intrusive.
cold, I imagine, and being able to burn a lot of oxygen at the same time.
There's a lot of speculation about why their noses were the way they were. And they also had lower foreheads with a brow ridge that stuck out, you know, pretty far compared with what people have today. Now, there are people today that actually look very similar to how the Neanderthals looked in terms of their skull shape and their brow ridge. I'll put some samples of that in the slideshow. Actually, Stilgari, did you watch Babylon 5?
Yeah, I watched it.
Okay, you remember the guy, the ranger? What was his name? The guy that had like always fought with the bow staff. Name escapes me at the time. The guy that was
what alien race was he?
he was a human. He was the ranger that came in like season 2 or 3.
I don't remember.
Had the bow staff. I wish I could remember.
Put up a picture. Yeah.
I'll put up a picture, but basically that guy is an example of a Neanderthal face. He fits it like almost perfectly. So it looks like this stuff is in our gene pool. It can potentially come out again. And that's generally true of all mixed race populations, like in parts of the world where you have two different races that contributed the genetic material to the population. Usually one of those phenotypes is more dominant than the other, but the recessive phenotype or the phenotype which there's less of can still reappear in the gene pool because it's there already lurking. So another thing.
Den Bach? Was it Den Bach, the guy?
I think the
Babylon?
actors. Hold on a second. I'll tell you here a second.
I'm trying to find it now. But oh no, that's the name of the staff. Oh, sorry, no. Let's not get off. Continue. I'll keep looking. You continue with your story.
Okay.
And by the way, and sorry, I'm gonna throw you off again before you get back to your story. I just looked up 1,000 centiliter because I'm dumb to 1,200 centiliter. 1,000 centiliter is just a liter. That's actually not a lot. I guess.
All right, Stilgar, the character's name was Marcus Cole, and the actor that played him was Jason Carter. So look up images of that guy, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay.
you see it now?
It looks English to me.
But look at his face
Yeah,
and
it's
his
very
brow
wide.
ridge and his forehead and
Yeah.
his nose. So I'm not trying to insult him or anything. I think it's cool. But that's just an example. And then there's other examples. There's other actors and stuff, but like the kind of stuff I watch isn't the kind of stuff that most of humanity watches. So they wouldn't know what I was talking about if I start naming all these people.
Yeah. So let's get back on topic.
So okay, so like I said, they had larger brains. Okay, the one thing about the brow ridges is that they're not found in they're not prominent in the child specimens of Neanderthals. It's only in the adults. So that's kind of interesting. But one thing I know that I've learned is that as your body, like today with us modern humans, we start aging generally at 25. That's when the process of death begins. And usually we stop growing around like 19. I think it's like 17 if it's a girl. But your face, there's bones in your head that continuously grow the rest of your life. And one of them is like your nose, and also your brow ridge continues to grow. So usually this stuff won't be in kids. It probably form later.
Yeah, I was wondering if but you mentioned they have bigger pelvic bones as well, but because if their heads were really big, then you might have had a higher percentage of death in childbirth as well, which might be a reason that they went extinct.
Well, the
Anyway,
pelvis is bigger, so it doesn't
yeah,
matter if the baby's head is bigger.
okay, all right.
Okay, so this comes from genetic analysis of them. It was shown that most of the Neanderthals, they had pale skin and red hair. Red hair was pretty common. I don't know if it's most of them, but it was more common than with Europeans today. And of course, it's more common with us than it is with other races of the world. And they were more vulnerable to sunburn. So 70% of modern Europeans have a gene on the 9th chromosome, which comes from Neanderthals, and it codes for skin color. And 66% of modern Europeans have a Neanderthal gene, which causes an increased risk of childhood sunburn. So here are some modern traits. I'm just going to list them off that people today have, which most likely comes from Neanderthal ancestry, or that's how they've been traced. They've been traced to this. So a large nose, which is both broad and projecting, rosy cheeks, hair which is both straight and thick. A lot of like Asians, they usually have straight hair, but it's not thick. So think of like that level of straightness, but not thin. And then
I think a lot of Asians have thick hair, actually. But anyway.
well, then yeah, they also have this stuff in them too. A non-protruding chin and large eyes. Being a morning person, if it's easy for you to get up in the morning and you get up on your own and feel good, that's probably potentially a result of your Neanderthal ancestry. Then heightened risk of nicotine addiction, which is something I've never tried, so I don't even know. Increased vulnerability to sunburn and difficulty in tanning, which I mentioned before. So how many of these things do you have, Stilgar?
Most of them.
Most of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two of them that I know of, which is the large eyes and then the sunburn. Okay,
Yeah,
so
ease into it. I used to get burned as a kid, but I imagine a lot of Asians have these issues also. And I also know that smoking is quite common in Asian countries as well.
yeah,
So,
Asians they have more of the DNA than we do, but I think they didn't get the stuff coding for like skin and hair color. That seems to be more in us, because they generally have, and even like when Asians have light skin, because there are some Asians that are lighter than me, but they still can tan. Like they
Yeah, I can
usually don't
tan
just
though. I can tan. I
yeah.
know a lot of Irish people and like English people have a hard time tanning. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I always blamed it on my Irish ancestry, but it looks like it might be due to something even older than that, potentially.
but
Um,
if they had red hair, then their level of pain tolerance would have been higher as well. Because people with red hair today, they have a higher pain tolerance, which is linked to a variant of the melanocortin 1 receptor gene, which is responsible for red hair and fair skin.
hmm.
So that's probably something that would have been part of the Neanderthals as well then.
Well, supposedly they actually had stronger pain receptors and felt pain more acutely.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw some studies that where they said that.
Okay.
And that was another thing which I forgot to add, but since you brought it up, that was another thing they said might be traced back to Neanderthal ancestry. So now what I want to do is talk about their culture, what we can tell of it, and this kind of uh, is also linked a little bit to their genetics. So it looks like the Neanderthals, maybe every single one of them, had autism,
Hey,
and
hey,
there's
hey, Ivor, may I do a suggestion? May I make a suggestion?
yeah.
Maybe we should split this up and do the culture in the next episode. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can
All
do
right.
that. You want me to split it here then?
Yes. Let's say goodbye now, and we'll keep some for the next episode. Does that sound
Oh,
good?
all right, yeah, that's fine.
All
Okay.
right. Let's do that. See you guys in the next one. And I think this is super interesting topic. I think we can do a multi-part on this one if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. Alrighty then, let's meet up again, and I will close it off. So,
Uh,
thanks for watching, everybody. And if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, do leave them below. And I'll see you guys in the next one.
Gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete. Tempus ades gratiae hoc corruptabamus, carmina laetitiae de voltere damus. Gaudete, Christus es natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete. Deus homo factus est natura mirante, mundus renovatus est a Christo regnante. Gaudete, Christus est natus, ex Maria Virgine gaudete.
Ezechiel porta classa perchancitur, unde lux est horta salus venitur. Gaudete, ex Maria Virgine gaudete.